They say no good deed goes unpunished. For Jack Morrison, a veteran firefighter of 30 years, that old saying was about to take on a whole new meaning. When he charged into the blazing penthouse of media mogul Victor Kane's high-rise to save a trapped 12-year-old boy, he was just doing his job. But 3 days later, when a black Mercedes pulled up to his modest suburban home, Jack realized this rescue was different. Inside a manila envelope lay something that would force him to question everything he thought he knew about that night. As he unravels a web of corporate deceit and orchestrated destruction, one question haunts him. Was he really meant to save that boy, or was he simply another pawn in someone else's deadly game? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn crept over Station 42 like it had for the past 3 decades. Quiet, steady and indifferent to the weight of years that Jack Morrison carried on his shoulders. The badge sitting in his locker, tarnished by time and service, caught the first rays of morning light filtering through the high windows. 30 years of rushing into burning buildings had left their mark, not just on the metal shield, but on the man who wore it. Jack's weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency as he checked his gear, each motion a ritual carved into muscle memory by countless mornings just like this one. The rubber seal of his mask, the straps of his turnout gear, the regulator on his air tank, all received the same methodical attention they had since his first day on the job. "Morning, old-timer," came a voice that pulled him from his routine. Sarah Chen, the station's newest firefighter, stood in the doorway, her fresh-pressed uniform a stark contrast to Jack's well-worn attire. At 28, she reminded Jack of himself when he'd first started, eager, idealistic, and still untouched by the harder realities of the job. "You're early again, kid," Jack replied, his voice carrying the gravelly texture of someone who'd breathed too much smoke over too many years. Trying to make the rest of us look bad," Sarah grinned, dropping her bag beside her locker. "Just trying to keep up with the legend of Station 42. Though I heard a rumor that said Legend might be thinking about hanging up his helmet." Jack's hands paused over his equipment. The retirement papers in his locker seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. After 30 years, the department had made it clear they'd understand if he wanted to step down. His wife, Marie, had been dropping hints about spending more time with the grandkids. Even his body, despite his best efforts to ignore it, had started sending signals that maybe it was time. "Don't believe everything you hear," he muttered, but the words lacked conviction. His mind drifted to his last major fire, 2 weeks ago at the old Reynolds warehouse. He'd made it through, saved 2 workers trapped in the basement, but his recovery time wasn't what it used to be. The cough had lingered longer, the aches dug deeper. The station's alarm system chose that moment to screech to life, its harsh tone echoing through the morning quiet. "Engine 42, Ladder 42, respond to 1242 Oak Street, reported structure fire." Jack and Sarah moved in perfect synchronization with the rest of the crew, muscle memory taking over as they donned their gear. As Jack climbed into the truck's officer seat, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window, gray hair at the temples, lines etched deep around his eyes, but the same determined set to his jaw that had been there on his first call. The engine's siren wailed to life, and Jack felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had never diminished, not in 30 years. Maybe he was getting older, maybe the retirement papers were waiting, but right now, none of that mattered. There was a fire to fight, and that's what Jack Morrison did. It's what he'd always done. As they pulled out of the station, Sarah's words echoed in his mind. The legend of Station 42. He'd never thought of himself that way. He was just a firefighter doing his job. But as the morning sun painted the city in shades of gold and promise, Jack couldn't help but wonder how many more rides like this he had left, how many more chances to make a difference. The truck turned onto Oak Street, and Jack pushed the thoughts aside. Whatever tomorrow held could wait. Right now, someone needed help, and that's all that had ever mattered. The Oak Street fire turned out to be nothing more than a faulty electrical panel, but it gave Jack plenty to think about as he sat at his desk later that morning, staring at the retirement papers he'd been carrying in his locker for the past 3 months. The department letterhead seemed to mock him with its officiality, the blank signature line waiting for a decision he wasn't sure he was ready to make. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried through the open office door. "Another development fire over. In the East Side, third one this month." The conversation caught Jack's attention, pulling him away from his retirement dilemma. "Same pattern?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying a note of suspicion that Jack had noticed developing over the past few weeks. "Eerily similar," Rodriguez replied. "Empty building, recently sold. Insurance papers barely dry on the desk. Fire starts in the middle. Of the night, no witnesses." Jack pushed his chair back and joined them in the common area, where the morning news played silently on the television. A familiar face dominated the screen. Victor Kane, the city's most prominent developer, standing in front of another gleaming tower bearing his name. "Speaking of development," Sarah nodded toward the screen, "looks like Kane's empire keeps growing. That's the 3rd building he's acquired this quarter." Jack studied the image, noting the way Kane's perfectly tailored suit and practiced smile couldn't quite mask the coldness in his eyes. "Funny how many of those acquisitions happen right after mysterious fires," he said, voicing the thought that had been nagging at him for months. Rodriguez shot him a warning look. "Careful with that kind of talk, Morrison. Kane's got more lawyers. Then we've got fire hoses, and deeper pockets than the city treasury," Sarah added, but her expression suggested she shared Jack's concerns. The station's printer hummed to life, spitting out the morning's incident reports. Jack picked them up, his eyes scanning the familiar format until something caught his attention. "Take a look at this," he said, spreading the papers on the table. "Every major fire in the past 6 months. Notice anything?" Sarah leaned in, her brow furrowing as she studied the pattern Jack was seeing. "They're all within the boundaries of Kane's proposed urban renewal project." "Could be coincidence," Rodriguez offered, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Jack traced the locations on the map with his finger, each point representing not just a fire, but displaced families, lost histories, changed neighborhoods. 30 years on the job teaches you one thing for certain. There's no such thing as coincidence when it comes to fire patterns. The retirement papers in his office seemed to weigh even heavier now. Jack had always believed in leaving things better than he found them, but walking away now, with these questions unanswered, felt wrong in his gut. "What are you thinking, old-timer?" Sarah asked, recognizing the look on his face. Before Jack could answer, the station's computer pinged with an incoming alert. Rodriguez clicked it open, his expression darkening. Well, looks like Kane Industries just filed permits for emergency demolition on all those damaged properties, citing public safety concerns after the fires. How convenient, Jack muttered, years of experience telling him this was more than bureaucratic efficiency at work. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the station windows as Jack finally returned to his office. The retirement papers still lay on his desk, but now they seemed to ask a different question. Was he really ready to walk away, not just from the job, but from the responsibility that came with 30 years of knowledge and instinct? He picked up his phone, scrolling to a contact he hadn't used in years. Tommy Reeves, an old friend who'd moved from firefighting to fire investigation. If anyone could help him make sense of these patterns, it would be Tommy. As Jack typed out a message, Sarah appeared in his doorway. "You're not really thinking of retiring now, are you?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Jack looked up at her, then back at the retirement papers. With deliberate movements, he picked them up and slid them back into his locker. "Let's just say I've got a few more fires to fight before I'm done." The setting sun painted Station 42's walls in shades of orange and red, colors that Jack had spent a lifetime walking into. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fires to fight. But for the first time in months, he felt certain about which path he needed to take. Sometimes, he realized, the hardest fires to fight were the ones that burned beneath the surface, hidden from view but threatening to consume everything in their path. The call came in at 9:47 p.m., just as Jack was finishing up the paperwork from their last run. The dispatch recording would later become crucial evidence, but in that moment it was just another voice crackling over the station's speakers. Engine 42, Ladder 42, Battalion 5, respond to Kane Tower, 1275 Metropolitan Avenue. Multiple reports of fire and smoke from upper floors. Security confirms active fire in the penthouse level. Jack was already moving before dispatch finished the address, muscle memory taking over as he shrugged into his turnout gear. But something in the dispatcher's voice made him pause, a subtle tension he'd learned to recognize over 3 decades of answering calls. Engine 42, respond, he acknowledged, catching Sarah's eye across the bay as she sprinted to her position. Dispatch, any reports of occupants? The response crackled back immediately, too quickly, as if someone had been waiting for the question. Security reports all floors evacuated except penthouse level, unable to confirm occupants. As they pulled out of the station, Kane Tower rose before them against the night sky, its upper floors disappearing into a layer of low clouds. The building had featured in countless news stories over the past year. Victor Kane's crown jewel, a testament to his growing empire. Now, an orange glow pulsed from its highest floors, like an angry beacon. "Something's not right about this," Sarah said, from beside him, her voice barely audible over the engine's siren. "Security protocol for that building requires immediate confirmation of occupants during any alarm." Jack nodded, impressed by her thoroughness. She'd clearly been doing her homework on the high-rises in their district. "You've been studying the building plans ever since we started getting all those development fires," she replied. "Kane Tower's supposed to have the most advanced fire suppression system in the city. Triple redundancy, automatic compartmentalization, positive pressure stairwells. The kind of system that doesn't just fail," Jack finished her thought, his suspicions growing stronger with each passing block. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over their headsets. "Jack, I want you and Chen taking the primary search of the penthouse. Building security will meet you at the command post with access cards and floor plans." As they pulled up to the tower, Jack's attention was drawn to a group of men in expensive suits huddled near the building's entrance, their faces illuminated by cell phone screens. One of them looked up as Jack passed, and he recognized Martin Drake, Kane Industries' chief of security, speaking urgently into his phone. The building's security team met them with electronic access cards, but their usual professional demeanor was replaced by barely concealed panic. "Mr. Kane's son," one of them blurted out. "He was in the penthouse game room when the fire started. We can't reach him." Jack exchanged a look with Sarah as they headed for the stairs. In his experience, panicked security teams usually meant there was more to the story than they were telling. "Dispatch, time check," Jack called into his radio as they began their ascent. 2150 hours, came the response. Jack made a mental note. Response time, personnel locations, timestamps. 30 years had taught him to document everything when things didn't feel right. As they climbed past the 50th floor, Jack's radio crackled again. This time it was Tommy Reeves, his voice tight, with urgency. "Jack, you copy? I just got an alert about Kane Tower. Listen to me. That building's fire suppression system was scheduled for a complete shutdown tonight. Maintenance records were just filed this afternoon." Jack stopped on the landing, his mind racing. "Copy that," he responded, then switched to the tactical channel. "Sarah, how many maintenance shutdowns have you ever seen scheduled to start at night?" "None," she replied immediately. "It's always done during business hours when the building's fully staffed." They exchanged a knowing look through their masks. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't a routine fire call. But somewhere above them, A child needed help, and that had to take precedence over their suspicions. As they pushed past the 60th floor, the temperature began to rise noticeably. Smoke stained the stairwell walls, and the familiar sound of fire consuming expensive materials echoed down from above. "Command, Engine 42, Jack radioed. "Approaching penthouse level. Heavy smoke conditions, hearing active fire." The response was garbled by static, but one detail came through clearly. The building's automated fire doors weren't responding to commands. The system designed to contain a fire like this was completely offline. Sarah checked her air gauge, then looked at Jack. In her eyes, he saw the same question he'd been asking himself since they got the call. Was this really just another fire, or were they walking into something much more dangerous? The answer, Jack suspected, lay behind the penthouse door ahead of them, where orange light pulsed through the gaps like a warning. Whatever they were about to find, one thing was certain. This was no ordinary call to Kane Tower. The penthouse security footage would later reveal crucial details about the events leading up to the fire. But in that moment, Jack and Sarah faced only the immediate reality of superheated air and flickering shadows as they prepared to breach the entrance. "Ready?" Jack asked, positioning himself by the door. Sarah nodded, her stance perfect, exactly what he'd expect from someone who'd studied the building's layout so thoroughly. The electronic lock clicked open with their security card, and immediately Jack's practiced eye caught something wrong. The fire pattern on the doorframe wasn't consistent with a natural spread. The burn marks were too precise, too controlled. "Check your seal," he commanded, adjusting his own mask. The air here felt wrong, carried scents that shouldn't be present in a typical structural fire. This isn't normal combustion. They moved into the penthouse in perfect tandem, their lights cutting through the thick smoke. The opulence of Kane's private sanctuary was still visible beneath the layer of soot. Crystal chandeliers, priceless artwork, imported marble floors. All of it now transformed into a hellscape of smoke and shadow. "First bedroom clear," Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the intensifying heat. "Wait! Jack, look at this!" He turned to find her crouched by an air vent, her gloved hand pointing to something that made his stomach tighten. The vent cover had been recently removed and replaced, the screws still shiny against the smoke-stained wall. Inside, barely visible, was what looked like the remains of an accelerant canister. "Command, Engine 42, Jack radioed, his voice carefully neutral. "Be advised we're finding evidence of possible incendiary devices. Recommend notifying arson investigation." The response was immediate, but not from command. Instead, Martin Drake's voice cut through the static. "Negative, Engine 42. Focus on locating the boy. Investigation protocols can wait." Jack exchanged a loaded look with Sarah. Security chiefs didn't typically monitor tactical channels, and they certainly didn't countermand fire department protocols. A crash from deeper in the penthouse cut short any discussion. They advanced through what had once been a luxurious living room, finding more evidence with each step. The fire had multiple points of origin, each one carefully placed to control the path of destruction. This wasn't just arson, it was choreographed devastation. "Help! Please!" The cry was faint but distinct, coming from behind a heavy wooden door. The game room, according to the floor plan they'd memorized on the way up. "Fire department, call out!" Sarah shouted, already moving toward the sound. "In here! I can't breathe!" The door was hot, but not fully involved. Jack's thermal imaging camera showed a small figure huddled in the far corner of the room beyond. But something else caught his attention, a second heat signature just for a moment, moving away through what should have been a solid wall. "Stand back from the door," Jack called out, positioning himself for entry. The boy's voice had sounded clear, too clear for someone who'd supposedly been trapped in a smoke-filled room for this long. They breached the door together, and the game room came into view. Despite the smoke, Jack immediately noticed that the sprinklers in this room showed signs of recent tampering. The boy, Kane's son Timothy, was exactly where the thermal camera had shown him, but his positioning seemed staged, almost theatrical. "I've got him," Sarah called, moving forward. "Tim, we're going to get you out of here." The boy looked up, and Jack caught a glimpse of something unexpected in his eyes. Not panic or relief, but what almost looked like guilt. "I'm sorry," Tim whispered as Sarah reached him. "They said nobody would get hurt." Before Jack could process those words, his radio crackled again. This time it was Tommy. "Jack, get out of there. I just found something in the maintenance logs. The structural supports on that floor have been—" A deep groan cut through the roar of the fire, and Jack felt the floor shift beneath them. "Sarah, move, now!" She scooped up the boy as sections of the ceiling began to give way. Jack's experienced ear recognized the sound of engineered collapse. Someone had wanted this floor to fail, and they'd planned it down to the minute. They ran through the sprawling penthouse, Jack's mind racing as fast as his feet. The security footage he'd glimpsed on the way in, the disabled sprinklers, the planted accelerants, the boy's apology. This wasn't just a fire, it was an elaborate performance. But for whose benefit? Behind them, the expensive flooring began to buckle as support beams, weakened by more than just fire, started to fail. Jack keyed his radio one last time. "Command Engine 42, emergency evacuation in progress. Be advised this is a criminal scene." I repeat, criminal. The rest of his transmission was lost in the sound of structural failure as the penthouse floor began its catastrophic collapse. Whatever game was being played here, Jack realized, they were all just pawns on someone else's board, and they were running out of time to figure out the rules. The boy's tablet, discovered partially melted in his backpack during their escape, would later provide crucial evidence. But in that moment, Jack's world narrowed to three simple objectives: protect Sarah, save the child, and find a way out of the death trap the penthouse had become. "Stay close to the wall!" Jack shouted as another section of floor gave way behind them. Sarah clutched Timothy tightly, moving with the practiced grace of someone who drilled evacuation procedures until they became instinct. The boy clung to her, his earlier guilt replaced by genuine terror as the building groaned around them. Jack's mind raced through the building plans he'd studied. The main exit was already cut off by the spreading collapse. The service elevator would be offline. That left the executive escape route, he called out, remembering Sarah's earlier research. "Behind the bookcase in Kane's study. Private exit," Timothy confirmed between coughs. "Dad uses it when press shows up." They found the study choked with smoke, but still structurally sound. Jack's flashlight beam caught the gleam of expensive leather bindings and rich mahogany panels. "Look for a switch, a lever, anything." Sarah set Timothy down, keeping one hand firmly on his shoulder. "There," she pointed to a row of books. "Those aren't real, they're plastic." Jack ran his hands along the shelf until he felt it, a subtle catch that gave way under pressure. The bookcase swung outward with well-oiled precision, revealing a narrow corridor with emergency lighting still functioning. "Go!" Jack ordered, but as Sarah reached for Timothy, the boy suddenly pulled away. "Wait! My backpack! I need it!" Before either firefighter could stop him, Timothy darted back into the smoke-filled study. "Tim, no!" Sarah moved to follow, but Jack caught her arm. "I'll get him. Start down the passage and call for evacuation teams to meet us at the bottom." The boy was already returning, clutching a sleek backpack to his chest, when Jack heard the distinctive sound of structural cables snapping somewhere above them. "Move!" he shouted, grabbing Timothy and practically throwing him through the doorway to Sarah. They raced down the narrow escape route as the collapse sequence continued above. The passage angled downward, built into the building's core structure. Emergency. Lights flickered, creating strobing shadows that made the descent even more disorienting. "Jack," Sarah's voice crackled through his radio. "The tablet in his backpack. There's something wrong about this whole setup." The kid knew this exit was here. He knew exactly where his bag was in all that smoke. "Later," Jack responded, though. His mind was already cataloguing the inconsistencies. the perfectly positioned accelerants, Drake's interference on the radio, the boys' apology. They emerged into a private parking garage 3 stories below ground level. Timothy stumbled, his breathing ragged, and Jack noticed something else strange. The boys' clothes were relatively clean for someone who'd supposedly been trapped in a smoke-filled room. Emergency response teams swarmed around them as soon as they exited the passage. Through the controlled chaos, Jack spotted Martin Drake speaking urgently into a phone, his face tight with barely contained anger rather than relief at the boys' rescue. "Timothy!" Victor Kane's voice boomed across the garage as the media mogul rushed forward, his expensive suit immaculate despite the late hour. "Thank God you're safe!" But Jack caught the split-second look that passed between father and son, not the desperate relief of a parent reunited with an endangered child, but something more complex, something that looked almost like a performance. "My boy," Kane announced, loudly, clearly playing to the gathering media cameras. "You're a hero for saving him. Name your reward, anything." "Just doing my job," Jack replied automatically, his attention drawn to Timothy, who was clutching his backpack with white-knuckled intensity. Sarah appeared at his side, her voice low. "The tablet slipped out when he fell. I saw the screen before. It went dark, looked like some kind of messaging app, recent notifications. Get it logged as evidence before it mysteriously disappears," Jack murmured back. "Already done." Called it in as potential proof of origin while Drake was distracted with Kane. Kane was still talking, playing the role of grateful father perfectly, but Jack noticed how the man's eyes kept darting to his son's backpack. Whatever was on that tablet, it was clear that multiple parties had gone to elaborate lengths to stage this entire incident. As paramedics led Timothy away for evaluation, the boy glanced back at Jack. This time, there was no guilt in his eyes, only fear. Not fear of the fire they'd just escaped, but fear of something else. Something that made a staged inferno seem like the safer option. Jack watched as Kane's private security team smoothly took control of the scene, already working to reshape the narrative. But 30 years of fighting fires had taught him to read the signs of something burning beneath the surface. This wasn't over. In many ways, he realized it was just beginning to ignite. The hospital report would prove to be the first crack in Kane's carefully constructed narrative. Jack stood in the emergency department's quiet corridor at 3 a.m., reading the preliminary findings that Dr. Elena Martinez had just handed him, his expression growing darker with each line. "Blood work shows trace amounts of mild sedation, Doctor," Martinez explained in a low voice, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "The kind typically used for anxiety. But here's the strange part. The metabolites suggest it was administered before the fire started." Jack looked up from the report. Someone drugged him deliberately before the fire? Just enough to make him compliant, not enough to incapacitate. She tapped the paper. "There's something else. His carbon monoxide levels are inconsistent with the exposure time reported. It's almost as if he wasn't in that smoke-filled room nearly as long as we were told," Jack finished, the pieces starting to align with his suspicions. The doctor nodded. "I'm required to report any suspicious findings involving minors. But Jack," she hesitated, "Kane's lawyers are already here. They're pushing to have him discharged against medical advice." Outside the hospital windows, dawn was beginning to break over the city. Local news vans had been arriving steadily for the past hour, their satellite dishes raised like periscoping submarines hunting for a story. On the waiting room television, shaky smartphone footage of the rescue played on repeat. "Heroic firefighter saves media mogul's son," the caption read, alongside a photo of Jack that made him look a decade younger than his 30 years of service. The coverage was perfectly crafted, emotionally resonant, and entirely missing the point. Sarah appeared at his elbow, still in her smoke-stained uniform. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. It showed a real estate news website. The timestamp just minutes old. Kane Industries announces emergency urban renewal initiative in wake of tragic fire. They didn't waste any time, Jack muttered, scanning the article. The plan called for fast-track demolition permits for dozens of buildings in the same neighborhood as Kane Tower, all in the name of public safety. It gets better, Sarah swiped to another screen. Look who just got appointed to oversee the project's safety compliance. Jack felt his jaw tighten. Martin Drake's corporate headshot stared back at him, accompanied by glowing praise for his handling of the Kane Tower incident. The fire's not even out yet, and they're already using it to justify their development plan. Sarah's voice carried the quiet anger of someone watching a long-suspected plot unfold. A commotion down the hall drew their attention. Victor Kane had arrived with an entourage of lawyers and PR people, all speaking urgently into phones or tablets. But it was the man walking slightly behind Kane that caught Jack's attention, a silver-haired figure in an expensive suit who seemed oddly familiar. "That's Senator Morrison," Dr. Martinez whispered. "No relation to you, I assume?" Jack shook his head, watching as the politician disappeared into Timothy's room. He'd seen the senator at countless ribbon-cutting ceremonies for Kane's buildings, always standing just off-center, always present, but never quite in focus. His phone buzzed, a text from Tommy Reeves. "Check your email. Found something in the building inspection records from last month. This goes deeper than we thought." Before Jack could respond, Kane emerged from his son's room, his media-perfect smile firmly in place. But as he passed Jack, he paused, his voice pitched for privacy. "A word of advice, firefighter," Kane said, his tone carrying a weight that had nothing to do with gratitude. "Sometimes heroes live longer if they stick to fighting fires instead of asking questions about them." Jack met his gaze steadily. "Funny thing about firefighters, Mr. Kane, we're trained to look for the source of the smoke, not just the flames everyone can see." Kane's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Indeed. Well, let's hope your pension plan is as solid as your principles." As Kane's entourage swept toward the exit, Sarah moved closer. To Jack, "That sounded an awful lot like a threat." "No," Jack replied, watching as Senator Morrison cast one last look in their direction before following Kane. "That was a warning shot. They're letting us know they've got the power to make this go away." He held up the hospital report. "Too bad for them. We've got proof it shouldn't." The morning sun finally broke through the hospital windows, casting long shadows across the corridor. Somewhere in the city, Kane Tower still smoldered. But Jack knew the real fire, the one that threatened to expose decades of corruption, was just beginning to burn. 3 days after the Kane Tower fire, Jack sat on his front porch, nursing a cup of coffee and the kind of bone-deep fatigue that came from too many sleepless nights. The morning paper lay unopened beside him, Kane's face prominently featured above the fold. He'd stopped reading the coverage after the second day. Too many convenient explanations, too few hard questions. The black Mercedes appeared silently, rolling to a stop in front of his modest ranch house, with the kind of precision that spoke of professional drivers. Its windows were tinted well beyond legal limits, and it bore no license plates, front or back. Jack set down his coffee, decades of instinct putting him on high alert. The rear door opened, but no one emerged. Instead, a hand appeared, feminine, wearing an expensive watch, and placed a manila envelope on the curb. The door closed, and the Mercedes pulled away, with the same deliberate silence with which it had arrived. He waited 5 minutes before approaching the envelope, scanning the street for witnesses or surveillance. The morning remained quiet, his neighbors already gone to their 9-to-5 jobs, leaving him alone with whatever message had been deemed important enough for this kind of delivery. The envelope was heavy, expensive stock, sealed with wax rather than adhesive. No markings, no address, no identification of any kind. Inside, he found 3 items: a USB drive, a handwritten note on watermarked paper, and a single photograph that made his blood run cold. The photo showed Senator Morrison standing in what appeared to be Kane's private office, handling a stack of documents. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 weeks before the fire, but it was the document visible in the senator's hands that caught Jack's attention. A building inspection report for Kane Tower, dated differently than the official one on file. The handwritten note was brief, the penmanship elegant but clearly disguised. The fire was a message, the boy was bait. But not for you, for his father. There are people within Kane Industries who can no longer stomach what's happening. The USB contains proof of 37 staged incidents, each one carefully orchestrated to force property sales at desperate prices. But the Kane Tower fire was different. Someone went off script. Someone decided to add murder to the plan. Look into Carlton Place, the old theatre district. That's where it started 3 years ago. That's where you'll find the first bodies. Be careful who you trust. Martin Drake has people inside the department. The hospital report you obtained already disappeared from official records. The only copy left is the one Dr. Martinez gave you. You have 48 hours before they finish cleaning up their mess. After that, even this evidence won't be enough. Not everyone in power serves Kane. Some of us remember what justice means. The note was unsigned, but a small insignia was embossed at the bottom, a scales of justice, subtly modified to incorporate what looked like a firefighter's axe. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Something weird just happened. Woman in a judge's chambers reached out, says she has information about Kane Tower, wants to meet. As if on cue, the USB drive in Jack's hand caught the morning light, its metallic surface reflecting. A similar scales of justice symbol. This wasn't just evidence, he realized. This was an invitation into a much bigger fight. He took one last look at his quiet street, knowing that accepting this information would change everything. The comfortable routine of his life, the simple clarity of fighting fires, all of it would be consumed by whatever conspiracy he was about to uncover. His phone buzzed again. Tommy, this time, just got access to the Carlton Place records you asked about. Jack, there's something really wrong here. 3 accidental deaths during the property acquisitions. All ruled natural causes, but the investigating officer, now working private security for Kane Industries. Jack picked up the envelope and headed inside, his decision made. Kane had been right about one thing. Sometimes heroes lived longer if they just fought fires. But some fires couldn't be extinguished with water and foam. Some fires required justice. He secured the envelope in his personal safe, next to the hospital report and his own copies of the Kane Tower incident logs. On his way out, he caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. The man looking back at him wasn't just a firefighter anymore. He was something Kane and his conspirators feared much more. A witness who couldn't be bought, and who understood that the most dangerous fires were the ones that burned in plain sight. Sarah, he texted back, tell that judge we'll meet. But first we need to take a walk through Carlton Place. Time to find out what's really burning in this city. Carlton Place looked like a mouthful of broken teeth, jagged remnants of what had once been the city's theatre district. Jack and Sarah stood before the ruins of the majestic theatre, its Art Deco facade still proud despite years of neglect. A faded condemned notice fluttered in the morning breeze, its date matching the first suspicious fire in the old department records they'd retrieved. 3 years ago, Sarah said, consulting her tablet. Fire started in the basement, spread through the ventilation system. Building was empty except for, she paused, frowning, except for Marcus Chen, the building's caretaker, found in his apartment above the lobby. Natural causes, Jack quoted from memory. Heart attack, according to the coroner's report. But look at the response time. He pulled out a stack of weathered incident reports, their edges worn from frequent handling. Engine 27 was first on scene, response time listed as 17 minutes. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Station 27 is 6 blocks away. Even in heavy traffic, they should have been here in 5, Jack finished. And the captain who signed off on that report. Let me guess, working private security for Kane Industries now? Jack nodded, then pointed to the adjacent buildings. Look at the pattern. After the Majestic burned, property values in the whole district plummeted. Kane Industries swooped in, bought everything at pennies on the dollar, but they never developed it, just left it to rot. Waiting for something, Sarah mused. But what? They moved deeper into Carlton Place, every step revealing more inconsistencies. Fire after fire, each one perfectly timed to drive down prices, each investigation rushed or botched, each resulting in more property falling into Kane's hands. "Jack," Sarah called from inside what had been the Olympic Theatre. "You need to see this." He found her in the former orchestra pit, phone flashlight illuminating what looked like recent footprints in the dust. "Someone's been here within the last few days," she said, "and they were looking for something specific." The beam of her light caught a metal box partially hidden beneath the old stage, a modern safe incongruous among the decay. Its door hung open empty. "Check the dates again," Jack said suddenly. "When did Kane Industries officially acquire this block?" Sarah consulted her notes. 3 weeks after the Majestic fire. Wait. She scrolled further. "The sale was approved by Senator Morrison," Jack finished. "The same senator who was handling those building inspection reports in the photograph." They spent the next hour documenting everything, Sarah's camera clicking steadily as Jack cross-referenced dates and names. The pattern was clear, but it wasn't until they reached the old Regina Theatre that they found what they were really looking for. "This is where it started," Jack said, studying the building's bones. "Look at the burn patterns on these support beams. This wasn't just arson, this was a test run. They were perfecting their technique." Sarah's flashlight beam caught something behind a fallen section of wall. "Jack." Her voice was tight. "Is that what I think it is?" He moved closer, his heart heavy with recognition. Scattered across the floor were the remains of accelerant canisters, identical to the ones they'd found in Kane Tower's penthouse. "They've been using the same method for 3 years, he said, perfecting it, developing their timing. The Regina was their practice ground. Sarah was already photographing the evidence when her phone buzzed. "Text from Tommy," she reported. "He found something in the old insurance claims. The Regina's owner, Elizabeth Foster, fought the sale to Kane, said she had evidence of tampering with the fire suppression system. Day before she was supposed to present her case. Let me guess. Natural causes, carbon monoxide poisoning in her sleep. Case closed, building sold, evidence sealed." Jack stood in the center of the destroyed theater, seeing not just ruins, but a pattern of destruction that stretched across years. "They didn't just burn buildings," he said quietly. "They burned evidence, burned people, burned the truth." His phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Judge Hawthorne, 4 p.m. today. Come alone. Bring what you found in Carlton Place. Watch for tails." As if in response, a car engine started somewhere nearby, then quickly faded away. They weren't alone in Carlton Place, and whoever was watching had just witnessed their entire investigation. "Sarah," Jack said, his voice low and urgent, "get those photos backed up, multiple copies, secure locations, and get yourself somewhere safe. This just became a lot more dangerous than questionable response times and missing records." She met his gaze steadily. "I didn't join the department to look the other way, Jack. Besides," she managed a grim smile, "somebody needs to watch your back while you're charging into burning buildings, metaphorical or otherwise." They emerged from the Regina into harsh sunlight, leaving behind the ghosts of Carlton Place, but carrying the weight of what they'd discovered. The evidence was clear now. Kane Tower wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the latest performance in a long-running show of corruption and murder, with the city's most powerful men directing from the shadows. And now, with a judge waiting to hear their findings, Jack and Sarah had front-row seats to the most dangerous act yet. The internal. Kane Industries' memo lay on Judge Hawthorne's antique desk like a lit fuse. Its corporate letterhead and careful language barely disguised the brutality of its true meaning. Aggressive acquisition strategies meant forced evictions. Site preparation was code for arson. Resistance mitigation referred to dealing with people like Elizabeth Foster. My clerk found this in a sealed case file, Judge Hawthorne said, her silver hair and stern demeanor reflecting 30 years on the bench. The original lawsuit never made it to trial. The plaintiff, unfortunately, suffered a fatal accident before the hearing. Another natural causes case? Jack asked, already knowing the answer. Car brake failure. The judge's mouth tightened. Very thorough brake failure that somehow erased the vehicle's diagnostic data. They were meeting in her private chambers, blinds drawn, white noise generator humming by the door. Sarah stood guard outside, watching for Drake's people. "There's someone you need to meet," Hawthorne continued, checking her watch. "Former Kane Industries project manager. She's been gathering evidence for months, building a case." After the tower fire, she reached out. A soft knock interrupted them. Sarah entered with a woman Jack recognized from news coverage of Kane's previous developments. Patricia Reynolds, until recently one of Kane's most trusted executives. "Ms. Reynolds has quite a story to tell," the judge said, then added pointedly, "one worth dying for, apparently, since Drake's people have already made 2 attempts. Patricia's hands shook slightly as she opened her laptop. "The tower fire wasn't supposed to happen that way," she began. "It was meant to be like the others. Controlled. Empty building, insurance claim, quick demolition. But someone changed the plan at the last minute, added Timothy to the equation." "Why?" Jack asked. "Why risk Kane's own son?" "Because it wasn't Kane's plan." Patricia turned the laptop, showing an email chain with sensitive headers. "Kane has been losing control of his empire. The senator and his allies have been squeezing him out, using the real estate portfolio to launder money for something bigger. The tower fire was a message. They showed Kane they could reach his family any time." "And Timothy?" Sarah asked. "Was he in on it?" "Partially. They convinced him it was a game, a way to help his father. The sedatives were supposed to keep him calm, make him follow instructions. But they used too much, nearly killed him. That's when I knew I had to get out." Jack studied the email chain, noting familiar names. Building inspectors, fire marshals, police officials. The corruption reached into every department that could have exposed the scheme. "Drake's been recruiting for years," Patricia continued, "finding people willing to look the other way, those who refused." She gestured at the memo on the judge's desk. "Well, you've seen their accident reports. The Carlton Place properties," Jack said. "Why keep them undeveloped?" Patricia's answer was cut short by Sarah's urgent return. "Black SUV just pulled up outside. Drake's security team." Judge Hawthorne moved quickly, pressing a hidden panel in her bookshelf. "Service elevator goes to the parking garage. Ms. Reynolds?" Patricia was already gathering her laptop, her movements practiced, someone used to running. "The Carlton Place documents are in a safe deposit box," she said quickly. "First Metropolitan Bank, box 2247. The key is the office door, splintered. Inward." Martin Drake stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men with poorly concealed weapons. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "I believe you have some documents that belong to Mr. Kane." "These documents belong to the court, Mr. Drake." Hawthorne's voice could have frozen fire. "And you're interrupting a sealed proceeding. A proceeding that won't be continuing." Drake's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Unfortunately, there's been a gas leak reported in the building. We're here to evacuate essential personnel." "Gas leak?" Jack stepped forward, his firefighter's authority taking over. "Funny, I didn't hear any alarm. It's being handled quietly to prevent panic." Drake's men were spreading out, covering the exits. "Now, if you'll all come with us." "Standard procedure requires immediate notification of the fire department." Sarah countered, her phone already in hand. "I should call it in." "That won't be necessary." Drake's tone hardened. "Please, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Jack caught the judge's eye, saw her slight nod toward the hidden panel. Patricia was already through, the laptop with its damning evidence secured. "You know, Drake," Jack said conversationally, moving to draw attention from the others, "I've been meaning to ask about your response times. 17 minutes to the Majestic? That's pretty slow for a station 6 blocks away." Drake's smile vanished. "Ancient history, Morrison. Let it go, or what? Another accident? More natural causes?" Jack stepped closer. "How many people have you burned to protect Kane's empire?" "Fewer than will burn if you don't drop this." Drake nodded to his men. "Search the office. Find those documents." The next few moments were chaos. Sarah triggered the fire alarm, its sudden blare startling Drake's men. Judge Hawthorne slammed the hidden panel shut, securing Patricia's escape, and Jack, moving with the speed of 30 years' experience, tackled Drake as the judge and Sarah slipped through a side door. "You're making a mistake, Morrison," Drake growled as they grappled. "You have no idea what you're up against." "Actually," Jack replied, driving his knee into Drake's solar plexus, "I know exactly what I'm up against. I've spent my whole career fighting fires other people started. Time to meet the arsonists." He broke free as real fire alarms began to sound. Sarah had done more than just trigger the system. Through the window, he could see smoke rising from a trash bin in the parking lot, drawing emergency response. Drake's men hesitated, caught between pursuing and maintaining their cover as legitimate security. Jack used their confusion to escape, knowing the building would soon be swarming with legitimate first responders. In the stairwell, he found Sarah waiting. "Patricia got away clean," she reported, "and I grabbed these." She held up her phone, showing photos of the memo and email chain. Drake was so focused on the paper copies, he forgot about digital evidence. Judge Hawthorne? Safe. She has a protocol for this. Apparently, we're not the first ones to stumble onto Kane's operation. They emerged into the parking garage as the first fire trucks arrived. Jack watched Drake's men trying to explain their presence to suspicious uniformed officers. "The safe deposit box," Sarah said. "We need to get there before they do." Jack nodded, but his mind was on Patricia's interrupted revelation about Carlton Place. Whatever was hidden in those abandoned theaters was big enough to kill for. And now, with Drake's direct intervention, they were running out of time to uncover it. "First Metropolitan Bank," he said. "But first, we need to make some copies of those photos. Something tells me evidence has a way of disappearing when Kane Industries takes an interest." They drove away as more emergency vehicles arrived there. Sirens masking the sound of Jack's phone, buzzing with a new message. "Time's running out. Carlton Place isn't just property, it's proof. Find the blueprints, find the bodies." Undit, the threatening letter was waiting on Jack's kitchen table when he got home. Impossible, given that he'd locked every door and window before leaving. The paper was expensive, the same watermarked stock as the note from the black Mercedes. But this message was different. "Your wife leaves for her teaching job at Lincoln Elementary every morning at 7:15. Your daughter Amy drops your grandson Thomas at Little Minds Daycare by 8:30. Your son Michael's construction site at 4th and Madison has some questionable wiring that our inspectors might need to examine. You've spent your life protecting families, Mr. Morrison. Time to think about your own. The safe deposit key, the Carlton Place evidence, the photos from the judge's office. All of it on your desk by midnight, or we start testing your family's smoke detectors, one by one." Jack's hands didn't shake as he read. 30 years of crisis response had trained that out of him, but his pulse quickened as he heard movement in the next room. He reached for his phone, but a familiar voice stopped him. "The house is clean." "Now, we swept it while they were inside." Jack turned to find Timothy Kane standing in his living room doorway, looking far more composed than any 12-year-old should after being used as bait in an arson plot. Behind him stood a woman Jack recognized from his research, Elizabeth Foster's daughter, Catherine. "Hello, Jack," Catherine said quietly. "Sorry about the dramatic entrance, but we needed to be sure Drake's people were gone before we approached." They left some interesting hardware. She held up several sophisticated surveillance devices. Amateur work, really. They're getting sloppy. You're supposed to be dead, Jack said, studying the woman whose mother had died trying to expose Kane's operation. That was the idea. Easier to fight them if they think they've already won. She moved into the kitchen with practiced efficiency, checking angles, sight lines. The judge called, said you and your partner had quite an adventure in her chambers. Timothy settled into a chair, his demeanor startlingly adult. "I'm sorry about the tower," he said. "I didn't know they'd drugged." "You didn't know they were going to—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "My father isn't behind this anymore. Hasn't been for months. They're using him, using all of us." "The senator's people," Jack said, remembering Patricia's interrupted revelation. Catherine nodded. Morrison and his partners needed Kane's real estate empire, perfect cover for moving money, staging accidents, storing things that needed to stay hidden. The Regina Theatre, that's where they perfected their method. But Carlton Place, she shook her head. That's where they're keeping their secrets, and they're dead. "The bodies," Jack said, remembering Tommy's text. "But why keep them? Why not—" "Because they're evidence," Timothy interrupted. "Dad kept records of everything. Insurance fraud they could handle, but murder—" He looked down at his hands. "That's why they used me, why they threatened him. He was going to expose them, use the records as leverage, so they showed him they could reach anyone." Catherine moved to the window, checking the street. "We've got a safe house ready. Your family's being moved there now. My people are good. They've been watching them since this started." "Your people?" She smiled grimly. "Mom wasn't just a theater owner. She was federal law enforcement, deep cover. Had been building a case against Morrison for years. When they killed her, some of us continued her work. The judge, Tommy, others. You haven't met yet. We've been waiting for someone like you, someone they couldn't buy or scare." "The black Mercedes," Jack said, understanding dawning. "The envelope. That was you. We needed someone they'd underestimate. A firefighter near retirement, no connections to law enforcement. Someone whose integrity was legendary, but who wouldn't raise suspicions." She paused. "We didn't expect them to escalate so quickly with the tower. That wasn't part of the plan." Timothy's phone buzzed. He checked it, his face tightening. "They're moving. Multiple teams. They're going to hit the bank tonight. The safe deposit." "A box," Jack realized. "But Patricia's key was a diversion," Catherine finished. "The real evidence is still in Carlton Place. Mom's last insurance policy. But we needed them focused on the bank while we—" She stopped as headlights swept across the windows. "Time to go. They're coming back." Jack's phone vibrated with a text from Sarah. "At the bank. Drake's people everywhere. But something's wrong. This feels like a trap," Jack finished. "They wanted us split up, divided." Catherine was already moving, gesturing them toward the back door. "Your partner's smart. She'll figure it out. Right now we need to get to Carlton Place, tonight, before they realize their threat didn't work." "Why me?" Jack asked, even as he followed them into the gathering darkness. "Why trust me with all this?" Catherine paused, her expression softening for a moment. "Because Mom always said the most dangerous people aren't the ones who start fires. They're the ones who've spent their lives running into them to save others. The ones who can't walk away when they see something burning." They slipped through back alleys as sirens began to wail in the distance. Jack's phone buzzed again, Sarah confirming. She was clear that she'd figured out the bank was a diversion. She was already headed to Carlton Place. The threatening letter lay forgotten on Jack's kitchen table, but its message had changed everything. This wasn't just about real estate anymore. It was about murder, corruption, and the thin line between justice and revenge. And somewhere in the ruins of Carlton Place, the truth was waiting, along with anyone willing to kill to keep it buried. The USB drive glowed faintly in the darkness of the Regina Theatre's basement, its contents playing across Sarah's laptop screen as Jack, Catherine, and Timothy huddled around it. The files Elizabeth Foster had hidden here 3 years ago were more than just evidence of real estate fraud. They were a blueprint of corruption that reached the highest levels of state government. Mom found the pattern by accident, Catherine explained, scrolling through documents. She was tracking insurance payments when she noticed the shell companies, each one tied to a different development project, each one moving money through Kane's properties. But the money wasn't staying. In real estate, Timothy added, his young face eerily lit by the screen. It was going somewhere else. That's what Dad discovered last month. The files told a story that made Jack's arson investigations look like a smokescreen. Campaign contributions routed through burned buildings. Offshore accounts filled with insurance. In payouts, and beneath it all, a pattern of federal contracts awarded to companies that existed only on paper. There, Sarah pointed to a familiar name. Senator Morrison's Infrastructure Committee. Every major project for the past 5 years went to corporations he secretly controlled, Catherine finished, using Kane's burned-out properties as fronts. The development was never the goal. They needed the buildings empty, the records destroyed, the witnesses silenced. Jack studied an architectural diagram, his firefighter's eye catching details others might miss. These aren't just building plans. They're showing something underneath Carlton Place, some kind of storage facility, Timothy said quietly. Dad, who called it the archive. That's why they can't demolish this area yet. There's something down there they need to protect. A sound echoed from above, footsteps, multiple sets. Catherine moved silently to the stairs, checking her phone. Perimeter teams down. Drake found us. How? Sarah asked, already backing up. The files. We were careful. Because I told them, came a new voice from the shadows. Tommy Reeves stepped into the dim light, his fire investigator's badge catching the laptop's glow. I'm sorry, Jack. They got to my family 2 years ago. Been their insurance ever since. Jack felt the betrayal like a physical blow. All those tips, the evidence you sent, was real, Tommy said, genuine regret in his voice. I've been playing both sides, trying to keep people alive. But after the tower fire, when they started killing kids, he looked at Timothy. I couldn't do it anymore, so I called in their location, but I also triggered the silent alarm. Police are already on their way. Footsteps grew closer. Drake's voice echoed down the stairwell. Check every room, find the drive. Too late, Catherine whispered, checking her phone again. They've got all the exits covered. But Jack was studying the architectural plans on the screen, 30 years of structural knowledge clicking into place. No, they don't. Look at this. The theaters were all connected underground, old prohibition tunnels. And if I'm reading this right, Sarah caught on immediately, the stage trapdoors, they weren't just for shows. They led to the storage facility, Timothy realized, to the archive. Which means there's another way out, Catherine said, through whatever they're protecting. Laptop screen flickered, showing one final document, a Homeland Security assessment dated 3 months ago. The words nuclear material storage and covert transport jumped out before Sarah quickly closed the file. It was never about real estate, Jack said. The full scope of the conspiracy finally clear. The development project, the fires, all of it was cover for moving something else through the city, something they needed to keep off the books. Dad found out last month, Timothy said, threatened to expose everything. That's when they decided to use me to show him what would happen if he talked. Drake's voice grew closer. Morrison, we can still make a deal. Think about your family. Catherine was already moving toward the stage, her actions practiced. The tunnel entrance is under the orchestra pit. Mum showed me once, made me memorize the route, said it might save my life someday. Like it was supposed to save hers? Tommy asked quietly. She got too close to the archive, Catherine replied, saw what they were really storing down there. After that, she swallowed hard. After that, she knew they'd never let her live. Jack made a quick decision. Tommy, how long until the police arrive? 10 minutes, maybe less. Okay, Sarah, get Timothy to safety. Catherine knows the tunnels. She'll guide you. Tommy and I will hold them here, buy you time. Jack, Sarah started to protest, but he cut her off. The evidence on that drive is everything. It proves the murders, the corruption, the real reason for Carlton Place. Get it out. Get it to Judge Hawthorne. The sound of splintering wood echoed from above. Drake's men were getting closer. What about the archive? Timothy asked. What they're storing down there? Sometimes, Jack said, thinking of all the fires he'd fought over 30 years. The best way to expose something is to let it burn. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then hugged him quickly. Don't you dare die, old-timer. You still owe me a retirement party. As Catherine led them toward the hidden entrance, Tommy moved to Jack's side. They'll kill us both, you know. Maybe, Jack replied, pulling out his phone and sending one last message to Judge Hawthorne's secure line. But first, they'll have to explain to the FBI hazmat team why they're guarding a secret nuclear storage facility that doesn't officially exist. Tommy managed a grim smile. Still fighting fires right to the end, huh? No, Jack said, as Drake's footsteps reached the basement stairs. Just making sure the right things finally burn. The surveillance photos spread across Judge Hawthorne's desk told their own story. Black SUVs outside Jack's house, men in tactical gear watching Sarah's apartment, Drake's security teams positioning themselves around Carlton Place. The net was closing, but they had one advantage. No one knew they were in the judge's secure office at the federal building, planning their next move. The FBI's nuclear response team is standing by, Judge Hawthorne said, hanging up a secure line. But they need more than suspicions. They need proof of what's in the archive before they can move, which we can't get without going back in. Catherine added, studying building schematics spread across the table. The USB drive proves the money trail, the murders, the cover-up. But the nuclear material is our ace, Jack finished. The one thing Senator Morrison can't explain away. No amount of political influence can survive that kind of exposure. Sarah's laptop pinged with an incoming email from Tommy. Drake's men are searching the tunnels, she reported, but they're avoiding the lower levels near the archive. Almost like they're afraid of something down there, Timothy said quietly. The boy hadn't said much since their escape, but he'd been watching everything with those two old eyes. The radiation badges, Catherine realized. Mom's last photos showed their security teams wearing radiation badges in the lower tunnels. Standard protocol for nuclear material storage, Jack nodded. Which means the archive has monitoring, equipment, sensors, records. And I know where Dad keeps the access codes, Timothy added. He doesn't know I saw them, in his private safe behind the painting in his study, which is currently surrounded by Drake's people, Sarah pointed out, pulling up another surveillance photo. Jack studied the images. 30 years of tactical experience clicking into place. Maybe that's exactly what we need. Keep their attention, focused on the obvious while we go in the back door, Catherine finished, catching his thinking. She pointed to the schematics. The tunnels don't just connect the theaters, they connect to every major building in the district, including Kane Tower, Sarah said, eyes widening, through the old maintenance tunnels, the same ones they've been using to move their nuclear materials, which are currently empty, Judge Hawthorne added, since they had to clear everything out before the fire. Standard protocol when staging an accident that big. Jack's phone buzzed. Tommy again. Drake knows you escaped through the tunnels. He's pulling men from the tower to search Carlton Place, but he's leaving the building's security systems active. No one in or out without electronic clearance. Which we have, Timothy said, pulling out his access card. Dad never deactivated my permissions, even after they used you as bait, Catherine finished gently. The judge moved to her computer, typing rapidly. I'm authorizing a sealed warrant for the tower. Once you're inside, anything you find is legally admissible. But you'll only have a small window before Morrison's people realize what's happening. How long? Jack asked. 2 hours, maybe less. The senator's already moving to shut down the Carlton Place investigation, claiming national security concerns. Sarah was already gearing up, checking her firefighters' equipment with practiced efficiency. The tower's security cameras will show exactly what we want them to show, Catherine interrupted, holding up a small device. Mom's old team left us some toys. This will loop their video feeds. As far as the monitors will show, the building's empty, except for the maintenance crews doing post-fire inspections, Jack added, understanding the plan, which is why 2 firefighters and a building inspector would have legitimate access. While I access Dad's safe, Timothy said quietly. No, Jack's voice was firm. You're staying here with the judge. You've risked enough. They used me to hurt my father, Timothy replied, suddenly sounding much older than 12. Used me to burn our own building. I need to help make this right. Catherine studied the boy for a long moment. He knows the tower better than any of us. Knows his father's habits, his security protocols, and... She hesitated. He's right, he deserves to help end this. Jack looked at the surveillance photos again, at the web of conspiracy and murder they'd uncovered. At the center of it all was a boy who'd been forced to grow up too fast, used as a pawn in a game he never asked to play. Okay, he said finally, but you stay with Catherine. No heroics. Judge Hawthorne handed Jack a final document, a federal warrant authorizing immediate inspection of any suspicious materials found in Kane Tower or connected facilities. The moment you have proof of the archive's contents, I can mobilize the FBI team, but until then, we're on our own, Sarah finished. They gathered their equipment, Sarah's firefighting gear, Catherine's electronic countermeasures, Timothy's access cards, and Jack's 30 years of experience running toward danger, instead of away from it. The surveillance photos showed Drake's men still searching Carlton Place, still unaware that their quarry was about to slip in behind them. 2 hours, the judge reminded them. After that, Morrison's people will shut everything down, classify it all as matter of national security. This is our only shot. Jack checked his phone one last time as they prepared to move out. Tommy's last message was brief. Drake knows you'll try something, but he doesn't know about the archive's monitoring systems, about the records. When you find them, burn it all. Ready? He asked his team. Sarah adjusted her gear, Catherine checked her devices, and Timothy stood straighter, looking for all the world like the son of a billionaire should, confident, composed, and completely in control. Time to fight fire with fire, Sarah said, managing a grim smile. They moved out into the gathering darkness, leaving the surveillance photos spread across the judge's desk like a map of corruption. Somewhere in Kane Tower, the proof they needed was waiting, and this time, Jack thought, the right things were finally going to burn. The recording device in Catherine's pocket captured every word as they confronted Victor Kane in his private office, 52 stories above the city. His face, lit by the glow of emergency lighting, showed none of the media-polished charm that had built his empire. Instead, there was only fear and resignation. I wondered who would finally put it together, Kane said, not even bothering to reach for the security alarm. Should have known it would be you, Morrison. 30 years fighting fires. You've seen how they really start. Like the one that killed Catherine's mother. Jack kept his voice steady, watching Kane's reaction. Or the accident at the Majestic. Or maybe like the one you staged with your own son. Kane's eyes flickered to Timothy, who stood beside Catherine near the office door. I never wanted. They said it would be controlled. Safe. Just enough to justify the insurance claim, the demolition permits. But then Morrison's people took over, and everything changed. The senator's team, Sarah said, checking the feeds on her tablet. Drake's already mobilizing response teams. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they reach this floor. Tell us. About the archive, Jack pressed. About what's really stored under Carlton Place. Kane moved to his wall safe, the painting concealing it still askew from Timothy's earlier access. It wasn't supposed to be nuclear materials. That wasn't the original plan. The tunnels were perfect for moving money, storing evidence, keeping certain items away from regulatory oversight. But then the senator's connection showed up, the one from the Defense Department. Who? Catherine demanded. General Ward, Anthony Ward, head of some classified logistics division. He said they needed a secure facility off the books, somewhere, to store problematic materials, things that couldn't go through official channels. Nuclear materials that weren't supposed to exist, Jack concluded. Kane nodded, pulling a thick folder from the safe. Decommissioned weapons, materials from old sites that were officially cleaned up, but still had hot zones. The kind of waste that would cause international incidents if anyone knew we still had it. And you agreed to help them. Sarah's disgust was evident. They didn't give me a choice. Kane's laugh was hollow. By then, they had enough evidence of our other operations to bury me. The real estate fraud, the arsons, the accidents. I became their perfect front. Who would suspect a developer of running a covert nuclear storage facility? Until Mom found out, Catherine said quietly. Elizabeth was too good an investigator, followed the money too far, found the radiation badges, the monitoring equipment. She was going to expose everything. Kane looked at Catherine. I tried to warn her, tried to get her out. But Morrison's people, they don't leave loose ends. Jack's radio crackled. Tommy's voice urgent. Drake's teams are in the building. 6 minutes to your floor. The monitoring records, Jack pressed. Where are they? Kane moved to his computer, typing rapidly. The archive has automated systems, radiation levels, storage conditions, transport logs, everything uploaded hourly to secure servers. Servers that, as of 10 minutes ago, are copying their contents to Judge Hawthorne's secure account. You're helping us? Timothy's voice carried equal parts hope and suspicion. Why now? Because they used my son. Kane's facade cracked, showing real emotion for the first time. They drugged my boy, put him in a burning building just to prove they could, to keep me in line, and I let them do it. Sarah's tablet beeped. Upload complete. Judge Hawthorne confirms receipt. FBI teams are mobilizing. It won't be enough, Kane warned. Morrison has too much influence. He'll bury it, classify everything. Unless what? Unless the evidence becomes too public to contain. Kane pressed another key, and screens around the office lit up with news feeds. Every major outlet just received an anonymous dump of documents. Financial records, accident reports, radiation data, everything except the most classified material, which is now safely with the judge. Drake's people will kill you for this, Catherine warned. Probably. Kane's smile was bitter. But they were going to anyway. Once the archive was empty, once they'd moved everything to their new facility, I was just another loose end. Jack's radio crackled again. Multiple teams converging on your floor. Armed response. The security feeds? Jack asked Sarah. Still looped. They don't know exactly where we are, but they're checking every room. Kane pressed something into Timothy's hands, a final flash drive. The rest of the evidence, everything I couldn't risk sending electronically, get it to the judge. He looked at his son, real regret in his eyes. I'm sorry, Tim, for all of it. Dad, go. The private elevator still works on emergency power. Catherine knows the extraction route. He turned to Jack. Keep him safe. Keep the evidence safer. What about you? Kane moved to his desk, pressing an intercom button. Security, this is Kane. Morrison and his team are in my office. Send response. Units immediately. He released the button, facing them calmly. I'll buy you time. It's the least I can do after everything. Victor, Catherine started, but he cut her off. Your mother died trying to expose this. Don't waste the chance to finish what she started. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Sarah was already moving toward the hidden elevator panel, Timothy clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. Go, Kane ordered. End this. End all of it. As they slipped into the escape route, Jack heard Kane greeting Drake's team with his media-perfect charm. Only this time, it wasn't hiding corruption. It was buying them time to expose it. The elevator descended silently, carrying them and their evidence toward safety. Above them, Kane was paying his final penance, giving his life to protect his son and expose the truth. "Dad," Timothy whispered, and Catherine pulled him close as they dropped through the darkness, racing against time and treachery toward whatever justice awaited. The security camera footage would later prove crucial in the federal investigation, showing Drake's teams pursuing them through the archive's tunnel network. But in that moment, all Jack could focus on was getting his team through the darkness alive, following Catherine's lead through the labyrinth beneath the city. "Left here," Catherine whispered, her familiarity with the tunnels evident in every decisive turn. "Mom mapped all of these, spent months learning every route, every checkpoint. The tunnels were different from the dirty Prohibition-era passages they'd used earlier. These were modern, clinical, designed for moving sensitive materials rather than bootleg whiskey. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly green glow, and radiation warning signs appeared at regular intervals. "Hold up," Sarah called softly from behind them. She pointed to her tablet, showing a thermal imaging feed from the security systems Catherine had hacked. 2 teams converging, one from the tower, one from Carlton Place. "They're trying to box us in," Jack realized. "Force us toward the archive's main storage area." Timothy clutched the flash drive, his father's last gift growing slick with nervous sweat. "Why there?" "Because that's where the radiation levels are highest," Catherine explained grimly. "Where they kept the worst materials. No one goes in. Without full protective gear, they're betting we won't risk it." A distant door clanged, followed by the echo of boots on metal gratings. Drake's voice carried through the tunnel network. "Remember, we need the drive. The rest are expendable." Jack checked his phone. No signal this far underground, no way to warn Judge Hawthorne or coordinate with Tommy. They were on their own. "Wait," Sarah said suddenly, studying the building plans on her tablet. "These tunnels weren't just for storage. Look at the ventilation system." Jack moved closer, his firefighters' training catching what she'd spotted. "They're not just vents, they're containment channels. In case of a radiation leak, they can seal off sections." Catherine finished. Mom's notes mentioned it. "Emergency protocols to prevent contamination from spreading to the surface." Another crash echoed through the tunnels, closer now. A voice crackled over a radio. "Team 2 in position, moving to intercept." "The containment system," Jack said, an idea forming. "Can we access it?" Catherine was already pulling out her laptop. "Connecting to a maintenance terminal." "Maybe, but triggering it would seal off whole sections. We could trap ourselves." "Or trap them," Sarah countered. "If we can time it right." Timothy stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "I know these systems. Dad made me memorize all the building protocols, even the classified ones. He was preparing me, I realize now, for this moment." Jack studied the thermal imaging feed. Drake's teams were moving in a standard search pattern, but they were being careful, too careful. "They're afraid," he realized, "of the radiation, of leaving evidence. They have to do this clean." "Which means they'll follow procedures," Catherine said. "Stay in the designated safe zones, avoid the hot areas." "Making them predictable," Sarah finished. Timothy was already working with Catherine at the terminal, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Each section has independent controls. We can seal them one by one, herd them like cattle." "Toward what?" Jack asked. Catherine smiled grimly. "Toward the truth." She pointed to a section of the plans marked in red. "The archive's main control room, where they kept all the original monitoring equipment, the stuff they couldn't scrub or destroy without raising flags with regulatory agencies." "More evidence," Sarah said. "Better." Catherine's smile turned fierce. "Security cameras, activated by motion, recordings backed up to off-site servers. If we can get Drake's teams on video inside a restricted nuclear storage facility..." "They can't classify their way out of it," Jack finished. More footsteps echoed, along with the squealing of rusty hinges. They were running out of time. Okay, Jack decided. Timothy, Catherine, get those containment systems ready. Sarah, watch. And their approach on thermal. We need to time this perfectly. They worked quickly, quietly, as Drake's teams drew closer. Timothy's knowledge of the systems proved invaluable, his small hands steady despite the pressure. First team approaching Junction C, Sarah reported. Second team moving through Tunnel 6. They're following the safe zones exactly. Ready? Jack asked. Catherine and Timothy shared a look, then nodded. On your mark. Jack thought of Kane, buying. Them time 52 stories above, of Elizabeth Foster, who died protecting this evidence, of all the fires that had burned to hide this conspiracy. Now, Timothy hit the command key, and the tunnels came alive with warning klaxons. Blast doors slid into place with pneumatic hisses, sealing off sections in a carefully orchestrated pattern. Team 2, blocked at Junction D. A voice crackled over the security channels. Radiation warnings active, can't proceed. Fall back. Another voice cut off as more doors slammed shut. They're moving, Sarah reported, watching the thermal feeds. Falling back to... Yes. They're taking the only route left open. Straight to the control room, Catherine confirmed. Where? Every second will be recorded from multiple angles. They could hear Drake now, his controlled voice showing cracks of panic. All teams, hold position. Do not enter unauthorized areas without proper... Too late, Timothy said with grim satisfaction. They're already in the hot zone. Cameras. Active recording everything? Time to go, Jack said, seeing their opportunity, before they figure out what we did. They moved quickly through the remaining open tunnel, Catherine leading them toward a maintenance shaft that would take them to the surface. Behind them, Drake's teams were being herded deeper into the archive, their every move now documented, on systems they couldn't access or destroy. Wait, Timothy said suddenly, pulling out his phone. One last thing. He typed quickly, then showed them the screen, a text to his father's private number. I understand now, Dad. Thank you. They emerged into the pre-dawn darkness behind Carlton Place, just as the first FBI response teams were arriving. Judge Hawthorne stood with the federal commanders, already coordinating the operation. Did you get it? She asked as they approached. Jack handed over the flash drive, while Sarah pulled up the thermal feeds showing Drake's teams trapped below. We got something better, he said. We got them on camera inside a restricted nuclear facility they claim doesn't exist. With radiation badges clearly visible, Catherine added. Time-stamped, documented, and backed up where they can't reach it. Timothy stood straighter, his father's son to the end. We got the truth, all of it. Above them, the first light of dawn touched Kane Tower's upper floors, where a father's sacrifice had bought them the time they needed. Below, Drake's teams were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous fires were the ones you lit yourself. And somewhere in the city, a senator was about to discover that his perfect conspiracy had finally, fatally, burned itself out. The media report package hit every major network simultaneously at 6 a.m., perfectly timed with the morning news cycle. Judge Hawthorne had orchestrated its release with the precision of a conductor, ensuring that no single outlet could be pressured into silence. Jack watched the story unfold on multiple screens in the FBI's mobile command center, each channel adding another piece to the puzzle. Breaking news from downtown, where federal agents have surrounded the Carlton Place district. One anchor's voice shook slightly as she read the developing story. Sources confirm the discovery of an unauthorized nuclear storage facility beneath the abandoned theaters. Another channel cut to helicopter footage of hazmat teams entering the area. Senator Morrison's office has declined to comment on allegations that his infrastructure committee was involved in the illegal transport of radioactive materials. Kane Industries CEO Victor Kane was found dead in his office less than an hour ago, a third reporter announced. Early reports suggest he may have left evidence implicating several high-ranking officials. Sarah worked methodically at a computer terminal, coordinating with federal technical teams as they process the data from the archive's systems. "The radiation monitoring logs go back 3 years," she reported. "Every shipment, every transfer, all of it documented. And backed up where they can't erase it," Catherine added grimly. She was watching thermal feeds of the underground facility, where Drake's teams were still trapped in the containment zones. "FBI tactical units are moving in now. Drake's people have nowhere to go." Timothy sat quietly in a corner, watching his father's face appear on screen after screen. The media was already crafting their narrative. The billionaire developer who died exposing a conspiracy, but they didn't know the whole story. Couldn't know how he'd sacrificed everything to protect his son. General Ward was just taken into custody, Judge Hawthorne announced, entering the command center. Along with 3 members of Morrison's staff, the senator himself is apparently unavailable for comment, but his private jet was just grounded at Newark. Jack studied the evidence boards where federal agents had mapped out the full scope of the conspiracy. Real estate fraud had been just the beginning, a cover for something far darker. The nuclear materials stored in the archive had been gathered from officially cleaned sites across the country, their existence hidden from international inspectors. They needed somewhere off the books, he mused, somewhere to hide everything that wasn't supposed to exist. And they needed someone like Drake, Sarah added, to make the problems disappear. The witnesses, the evidence. "Like my mother," Catherine said quietly. A commotion at the command center entrance drew their attention. Tommy Reeves was being led in by federal agents, his hands cuffed but his head held high. "The judge arranged a deal," he explained as they removed his restraints. "Full immunity, in exchange for everything I know about Drake's operation. Names, dates, every accident that wasn't really an accident." "Why now?" Jack asked his old friend. Tommy's eyes found Timothy. "Because they crossed a line, using a kid. That's not what I signed up for. And because someone had to prove that not every firefighter can be bought." The morning news channels were now showing archive footage of Carlton Place in its glory days. The theaters lit up for opening nights, crowds lined up for shows. All of it destroyed to hide the darkness beneath. "Senator Morrison's office has just released a statement," one reporter announced, claiming no knowledge of any unauthorized storage facilities and suggesting that these allegations are part of a coordinated attack on his infrastructure initiative. "Play the footage," Judge Hawthorne ordered. The screens filled with security camera views from the archive's control room. Drake's teams, their radiation badges clearly visible, moved through clearly marked nuclear storage areas. And there, unmistakable in his expensive suit, was Senator Morrison himself, dated just 1 week ago, inspecting what he now claimed didn't exist. "Send copies to every network," the judge commanded. "Let's see him deny what's right in front of him." Timothy's phone buzzed. A news alert about his father. The headlines were already calling him a whistleblower, a hero who died exposing corruption. But they didn't know about the private elevator, the secret evidence, the final chance at redemption. "He saved us," Timothy said quietly. "Not just me. All of us." Catherine squeezed his shoulder. "So did your mother," she told him. "They all did. Everyone who died trying to expose this." Jack watched as more federal teams arrived, as evidence was catalogued and secured, as years of corruption finally began to crumble. He thought of all the fires that had burned to hide this truth, all the lives lost to keep this secret. "Look," Sarah said suddenly, pointing to one of the screens. The news helicopter's camera had found something in the morning light. Protesters gathering at the edge of the police line, holding signs with Elizabeth Foster's photo. They remember. They all remember. The truth was spreading faster than any fire, consuming lies and reputations with equal ferocity. And somewhere in a sealed nuclear storage facility beneath the city, Martin Drake and his teams were learning the hard way that some things couldn't be buried forever. Justice, Jack realized, had its own kind of flame, and this one was just beginning to burn. The legal documents lay stacked on Judge Hawthorne's desk like a monument to justice. Federal indictments, arrest warrants, witness protection agreements. 1 week after the exposure of the archive, the machinery of law was moving with inexorable purpose. Jack studied the names on the top indictment. Senator Morrison, General Ward, Martin Drake, the architects of a conspiracy that had burned its way through countless lives. "Drake's talking," Judge Hawthorne announced, entering her chambers with Catherine and Sarah. 15 hours of testimony so far. Names, dates, every accident they ever arranged. "Including my mother's murder," Catherine added quietly. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent reviewing testimony, but her voice was steady. "They're upgrading the charges to first-degree murder, for all of them." Sarah set her laptop on the desk, bringing up the latest security footage from the archive. Federal teams in radiation gear moved methodically through the facility, documenting everything. They've identified materials from 12 different cleaned sites. International inspectors are being called in. "And Morrison?" Jack asked. "Under house arrest after his medical emergency conveniently landed him in a private hospital." The judge's smile was grim. "But his accounts are frozen, his allies are scattering, and 3 of his closest staffers have already made deals." "What about Timothy?" Jack had been worried about the boy, thrust into witness protection along with the evidence his father died protecting. "Safe," Catherine assured him. "My mother's old federal team is handling his security personally. He's already testified about everything. The tower fire, the archive, his father's final actions." The morning news played silently on the judge's television, showing footage of Drake being led into the federal courthouse. The man's expensive suit had been replaced by prison orange, his confident swagger reduced to a shuffling walk between U.S. Marshals. "There's something else," Sarah said, pulling up another document on her laptop. "Remember those radiation badges Elizabeth Foster photographed? We traced the supplier. Every badge was logged, every exposure recorded. They can't hide what was stored down there or who accessed it." "The corporate side is collapsing too," the judge added. "Kane Industries Board is cooperating fully, trying to save themselves. They're releasing everything, every property deal, every insurance claim, every urban renewal project that was really about hiding evidence." Jack picked up one of the indictments, reading the formal language that documented so much suffering. "Conspiracy to commit murder, illegal storage of nuclear materials, obstruction of justice." "It's really over," Catherine said softly, almost to herself. "Mum can rest now. They all can." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy, now in protective custody himself. Federal teams found 3 more bodies in the archive tunnels. Cold cases from the first year. They're reopening everything. Carlton Place, Jack mused, thinking of the ruined theatres that had hidden so much darkness. What happens to it now? Timothy had an idea about that, Catherine said, managing a small smile. He's using his inheritance to restore the theatres, create a memorial to everyone who died trying to expose the truth. The Regina, the Majestic, all of them brought back to life. And the archive? Being cleaned properly this time, the judge said. Under international supervision, every material documented, every transport logged. No more shadows, no more secrets. Jack's phone lit up with a message from his captain. His retirement paperwork, still unfiled, needed a decision. After everything that had happened, the simple choice of whether to end his career seemed almost quaint. "You know," Sarah said, reading over his shoulder, "Station 42 could use a training officer, someone to teach the next generation how to spot the fires that aren't in the incident reports." Is that a hint? That's a plea from someone who's learned more from you in the past week than in 3 years of academy training. The judge gathered the indictments, preparing to deliver them to the federal prosecutor. Sometimes the most important fires we fight are the ones that burn in broad daylight, the ones everyone sees but no one stops. Until someone does. Catherine added, touching the photo of her mother on the judge's wall. Until someone decides. The truth matters more than safety. Outside, the morning sun caught the windows of Kane Tower, still standing despite the inferno that had exposed everything. Timothy's inheritance would transform it too, turning his father's monument to power into a center for corporate transparency and whistleblower protection. Jack thought of Victor Kane's final act of defiance, of Elizabeth Foster's dogged investigation, of all the lives burned away by people who thought their power made them fireproof. The conspiracy had been like a slow-burning fire, consuming everything it touched. But like every fire, it eventually met something it couldn't burn through: the truth. "You know," he said finally, picking up his phone, "Station 42 really could. Use someone who knows how to look past the obvious, someone who remembers that not all rescue operations involve running into burning buildings." Sarah's smile was answer enough. Some fires would always need fighting, and some fighters would always step forward to face them. The next generation needed to know that justice, like fire, required both courage and wisdom to handle properly, and sometimes the most important flames were the ones that burned away lies, leaving only truth in their wake. 1 year later, the New Station 42 dedication plaque caught the morning sun, its bronze surface reflecting more than just light. The names engraved upon it told a story of justice: Elizabeth Foster, Victor Kane, and all the others who had died exposing the truth. Below them, a simple inscription read, "For those who fight the fires, others ignore." Jack stood before it, his training officer's badge still feeling new after 6 months of teaching the next generation. Sarah emerged from the station, now wearing lieutenant's bars, followed by her newest recruit class. "Ready for today's lesson?" she asked them. "We have a special guest instructor." Catherine stepped forward, her federal investigator's credentials catching the light. The past year had transformed her from a hidden ally to a key figure in corporate corruption investigations. "Today," she announced, "we're learning about fires that never appear in dispatch calls." The recruits gathered around as Catherine spread photographs across the training room table, the restored Carlton Place theatres, now a thriving arts district and memorial centre. The Regina Theatre's marquee advertised weekly forums on corporate transparency and whistleblower protection. "1 year ago," Catherine began, "a conspiracy that had burned through our city for 3 years finally met firefighters it couldn't buy or frighten. Today, we're going to learn how they spotted what others missed and why that matters to every one of you." Jack watched his students lean forward, eager to learn. These were the next generation of firefighters, men and women, who would need to recognize corruption as readily as they spotted structural weaknesses or flashover conditions. "The archive has been completely cleaned now," Sarah added, pulling up recent photographs. "International inspectors confirmed the last materials were properly removed last month. But more importantly, the system that created it has been dismantled." She displayed news headlines: Senator Morrison's guilty plea, General Ward's conviction, Drake's extensive testimony leading to dozens of arrests. The conspiracy had unraveled completely, exposing decades of corruption across multiple agencies. "Timothy sends his regards," Catherine mentioned quietly to Jack. "He's doing well in the witness protection program, starting college early, studying corporate law and ethics. Plans to continue what his father started at the end, using wealth and privilege to expose corruption instead of hiding it." Jack nodded, thinking of Kane's final sacrifice and the legacy it created. The Timothy Kane Whistleblower Foundation was already making waves, supporting investigations into corporate misconduct across the country. "You know what I remember most?" Sarah said, joining them as the recruits reviewed case files. "That night in the archive when we realized some fires have to burn, the ones that burn away lies and expose truth." Mom would have liked that, Catherine smiled. She always said the hardest part of investigation was knowing which fires to fight and which ones to feed. The morning alarm tone sounded, a real call this time. Jack watched with pride as his recruits moved with practiced precision, Sarah leading them with the confidence of someone who had faced down far worse than a standard structure fire. Engine 42, ladder 42, respond to... The dispatcher's voice was clear, professional. No more hidden meanings, no more corrupt officials manipulating response times. The system wasn't perfect, but it was cleaner than it had been in years. Go, Jack told his team. Remember your training. Remember to look past the obvious. And remember, some fires burn in broad daylight, they chorused back, a mantra he had drilled into them over months of training. As the engines pulled out, sirens wailing, Jack turned back to the dedication plaque. The morning sun had shifted, illuminating different names, different stories of courage and sacrifice. But the message remained the same. Truth, like fire, demanded respect, understanding, and sometimes the wisdom to let it burn away what needed to be destroyed. Catherine touched her mother's name on the plaque one last time before heading out. There would be other conspiracies to uncover, other corruptions to expose. But now there was a new generation ready to face them, trained to spot the fires that burned beneath the surface of power and privilege. "Ready for tomorrow's lesson?" Sarah asked, returning to his side. "The recruits want to hear the whole story, everything. About the archive, about Kane, about how it all came together." Jack smiled, thinking of all the lessons contained in that story, about courage, about justice, about the fires that had to burn and the truth that rose from their ashes. "Yeah," he said, watching the future of Station 42 rolling out to face. Whatever challenges awaited, I think it's time they learned about the fires that really matter.